We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Pillar 4 Committee for AIB that is meeting today. My name is Hope McGuire. I am the chair of the committee and also a supervisor for Montgomery County Public Schools for community schools, and I'll pass it to our vice chair, Ellie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ellie Mitchell. I am the director of the Maryland Out of School Time Network, and we are also the backbone for the Maryland Coalition for Community Schools. And I'll pass it to Joe.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Semenko. I'm the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation and a board member of the Accountability and Implementation Board. And I'll send it over to Shalita.
Hi, my name is Shalita Jones. I am a speech language pathologist at night, and during the daytime, I am a shared accountability specialist for Montgomery County Schools. I will pass it to Joy. Wait, I don't think Joy. Oh, okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Joy Schaefer. I'm the Government Relations Director at AIB. And I can't see everybody, so
I got you, Joy.
thanks.
And so one of our guests is here, who is Derek Anderson, who is the Executive Director for Community Schools with MSDE. And we'll have other members joining us throughout their time on the agenda today. But the first thing we want to do on our agenda is kick it off with any AIB updates. Then we'll move into legislative updates that will be provided to us by Joy.
Thank you, Chair Hope. Oh, Dr. Grant is on time. All right. For the AIB updates, we have some hiring updates. We are in the process of recruiting for 3 policy analysts, early childhood education analyst for high quality and diverse teachers, and then an analyst for accountability and governance. Also pertaining to Pillar 4, the special ed work group is in the final stages of completing their report. If you remember, they had requested an extension because their work was not done. And it was important work that needed to be accomplished. And so that is well underway, and they anticipate submitting their report in a little bit ahead of the extended deadline. And then, as you shared earlier, we have a special guest with us, and that is my colleague Joy. She is here to give a specific rundown of the General Assembly and all legislative updates for Pillar 4 as the AIB Government Relations Director. And those are the updates.
Thank you. So Joy, we will turn it over to you to share the presentation for legislative updates.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to share my screen, and if you could just let me know that it's sharing. Did it? No. Huh. I was disabled attendee screen sharing. Can Lisa, maybe you need to enable
Okay.
me to share?
Yeah, okay, try now.
There we go. All right. And then I won't be able to see folks. So if you just want to let me know there's a question or comment, I'm happy to pause. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon to provide you a overview of legislative changes with regard to Pillar 4. So just as a broad overview, there were 2,600 bills filed this session. 878 passed. And while the governor has signed a few bills already, May 27th is the deadline for him to either sign, veto, or allow those bills to take effect without his signature. And then just to give you an overview for, just awareness of the other pillars and the legislative changes that relative to them. For Pillar 1, a bill passed to require MSDE to convene a work group to conduct an analysis of the publicly funded pre-K mixed delivery system. And there was a bill also to expand a local property tax credit, giving counties the ability to offer a tax incentive to childcare facilities in order to support local childcare providers. Pillar 2 saw a bill pass that provides an additional quality pathway so that candidates can qualify for their initial teacher certificate, which should not only help candidates, but help with the teacher shortage a bit. For Pillar 3 in college and career readiness, I'll talk a bit more about career counseling and for middle and high school students when we unpack the governor's education bill. But there is a registered apprenticeship bill called the RAISE Act, which is key to the governor's strategy to grow the economy. And it has a goal to expand registered apprenticeship to new industries and employers. And in terms of governance and accountability, Pillar 5, there has been some changes to the oversight of community schools, which we'll get into a little later, as well as a shift in some responsibility required on behalf by the AIB for some additional reporting. So to focus on the governor's legislation on education, first I just want to take a step back and talk about his focus this session through his budget and his legislation was to grow the state's economy. And he did that on the foundation of 3 pillars. The first was investing in industries of the future. Those were the industries that would grow and diversify the economy. He identified 3 what he called lighthouse industries: information technology, aerospace and defense, and life sciences. The other pillar was to reform the tax system to make it more fair, simpler, and pro-growth. And then the third pillar was investment in people, which includes the state students and the workforce. And this is where his sweeping education bill comes in. So the governor's intent with the Excellence for Maryland Public Schools Act was to maintain the state's commitment to the blueprint while at the same time making adjustments to its implementation for long-term sustainability and implementation. So the governor's bill had 3 broad areas that it made adjustments to. A pause and collaborative time. And this is important to this committee because the collaborative time funding is embedded as part of the foundation per pupil allocation. And when you removed dollars from the foundation amount, the other formula funding that flowed through and from that foundation amount was also reduced. So he did hold harmless in the original bill text special education funding, but did not do the same for per pupil allocations for compensatory education and for multilingual learners. And then he also proposed a pause to community schools funding and the phase in of the percentage of schools and that qualified for that funding. And he also was trying to attack the problem of our teacher shortage, establishing some new programs and initiatives while at the same time expanding an existing program in order to bolster our recruitment, retention, and development of our teaching professionals. So where we ended, there was a lot of debate, not only in the media, but among the legislators, and many amendments between the House and the Senate. But what we eventually ended up with is something that I think reflects the values of both the General Assembly and the governor. So the first that I'll cover is collaborative time. So the legislature did pause collaborative time for 3 years. But in FY26, they are including the per pupil amount for collaborative time without the requirement for school systems to implement it. So the foundation, the result is the foundation amount remains the same as it was originally budgeted. And then from that, the at-promise funding for compensatory education and multilingual learners is also protected. And in FY27 and 28, that amount will not be provided to school systems, but because that number is now baked into, so to speak, the foundation amount in FY26, they do get a little boost in 27 in terms of their per pupil amount, which of course will be then increased by their inflation factor. And then in FY29, that begins year one of implementing collaborative time. School systems will then get $334 per pupil included in the foundation in FY29. And that, I'll just note, is the amount that is in current legislation. And then over the 7-year timeline now, school systems will get an increased amount per pupil each year through fiscal year 35. Per the original schedule legislated. And MSDE is required in FY26 to provide technical assistance to LEAs to develop innovative models for teacher collaboration. In terms of community school grants, so there was no pause to the concentration of poverty grants. But they also, the language also extends some flexibility to county boards to expend up to 50% of funds on behalf of eligible schools. That now comes with some different thresholds in terms of how many schools the system has to have in order to expend and distribute funds in this way. So the number is now 10 schools, or 35% of schools are eligible. If you have 35% of your schools eligible, you can distribute centrally on behalf of these schools. It changes the requirements to do that. So each school now must get an itemized list of services provided from that funding, the level of funding expended for each of those services, as well as the amount of funding spent on central administrative support. And it requires LEAs to develop a county-wide community school implementation plan that incorporates all the school level plans, and then that plan is evaluated every 2 years. And it also authorizes MSDE to establish the requirements for those plans, and it has the authority now to direct the expenditure of percentages of that funding to ensure compliance and alignment to those plans. The one governance change I think I mentioned earlier is that MSDE is now going to establish the process for school systems to appeal for that flexibility, and that removes what was previously the AIB's role in doing so. In terms of community school administration, there's more to it. There's increases or additional wraparound services that are eligible that were added. Improving student attendance and chronic absenteeism is one, as well as offering evidence-based in-school and in-person tutoring during the school day. There was already an Office of Community Schools and Expanded Learning Time and a Director of Community Schools, but MSDE is now authorized to hire staff to support the director. And the community school reporting is now, I think you might remember last session, community school coordinators were required to submit an annual evaluation both to MSDE and AIB. And both agencies were required to make those evaluations publicly available. The bill changes that slightly. So rather than the evaluations coming to both agencies, they're going to go to MSDE. And then MSDE is required to make those publicly available and summarize those evaluations, and then make those available and transmit them to the AIB and to the General Assembly. MSDE is also now required to conduct a statewide evaluation of community schools of the program. That is due by December 1st of 2028, and that should be submitted to the AIB and the General Assembly as well. So I mentioned briefly career counseling for middle and high school programs, career counseling for middle and high school students program. So this program was funded through legislation through FY26. There was a separate bill to make that funding permanent, but it was amended and then folded into the governor's education bill. And what ended up happening with relation to that is the per pupil allocation was extended through FY 2028. And along with it, there was an annual reporting requirement by program partners to the AIB that was required, and that's also extended through to align to the funding through 2028. The amended language in the governor's bill requires the AIB to report on the program by January 1st, 2027. And there's some very specific metrics that the AIB is to report on by that time. And then with regard to the Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports, originally the funding proposed was a reduced amount from 130 million in FY26, and every fiscal year thereafter to the governor put that level at 40 million in FY26 and every fiscal year thereafter. Eventually, the final bill adopted the Senate's amendment, which was to provide 70 million in FY26, and then for every fiscal year thereafter, 100 million. But I just want to note that there is 30 million that remains from FY25 that is able to be used in FY26. So if you take the 70 million that's in the bill for FY26 and add to that the FY25 amount, it's $100 million that's available in FY26. And then there's also hold harmless provisions for exceptional children funding, which in essence decouples from that pause in FY27 and FY28 in collaborative time funding. The per pupil funding for students at the Maryland School for the Blind, the Maryland School for the Deaf, and the Seed School. In terms of concentration of poverty, so there's two studies, and I talked about the concentration of poverty grant program study, but there's also a special education program study that for which MSDE is in consultation with the AIB, must contract with an independent entity and submit a final report by December 15th, 2026 at minimum. The study is to review and make recommendations on the cost of special education in the state, the rising cost of special education for pre-K students, and the appropriate funding formula for those students assumed to be covered in the blueprint per pupil funding allocation. The implications of the design assumptions in the existing special education funding structure related to long-term spending and cost, and the establishment of a system of multiple or tiered weights for special education funding based on disability and levels of service, as well as support needed. It's also required to take a look at the feasibility of complying with the minimum school funding requirement as it relates to special education funding. And it requires that the entity that MSDE contracts with seek input from county boards of ed, non-public special education public schools, special education advocates, and special education organizations. There's also an amendment provision in the governor's bill that was added because this summer, the Joint Commission on Cyber Technology, IT, and Biotechnology heard from LEAs, PZAM, and MSDE that there were pilots around the state with good reading and math results that were using tutors run by AI. These were totally grant-supported pilots. And also, in addition, no LEA can purchase an AI tutor because they are so new that they don't meet the requirements in this section of the code. So the timing of this, which allows the procurement of these tools through school year 2027-28, should allow, the hope is to have the technology develop so that it is more accessible, as well as provide time for the policy to catch up to the technology. And then some other additional bills that passed this session that don't have direct impact to Pillar 4, but that are certainly related to Pillar 4's work. There was a bill on restorative practice in schools. It requires MSDE to develop a comprehensive plan for establishing restorative practice schools. It requires MSDE to provide technical assistance for local boards who choose to establish a restorative practice school. And it also updates the state school discipline guidelines to include language on restorative practice. And then there was a bill for MSDE requiring them to establish a task force to study and improve and make recommendations on improving attendance and reducing chronic absenteeism in schools. They are to do quite a bit of data collection. And then they're going to require them, the bill requires them to make recommendations on a single definition for chronic absenteeism, as well as the role of the community, public agencies, school systems, families and students, and what role they have in solving that problem. And then finally, a bill passed to alter the membership of the Juvenile Services Education Board and members' terms. The changes include a reduction in the required meetings of the board. It provides authority to the majority of members, the chair, as well as the secretary of Juvenile Services to call a special meeting, which would not then count towards the monthly meeting. And then I just want to end with a few points about the budget. That took up a lot of energy this session. There was a lot of concern around the budget. We entered the legislative session with substantial shortfalls of cash and a structural deficit, which started at almost $5 billion, but grew during session to nearly $3.5 billion. At the beginning of session, there's proposals to reduce funding for blueprint formulas, as well as long-term budget shortfalls projected, $2.9 billion in FY27, as well as $6 billion in FY30. And where we ended was the General Assembly managed to provide us with a structurally balanced FY26 budget with almost $2.5 billion in cash reserves and a structural surplus of $5 million. And that was achieved through about $2 billion in reductions and $1.2 billion in new revenue. We ended the session with full funding of all blueprint formulas in FY26, as well as blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund funded fully through until FY28. And then it significantly improved the long-term budget outlook, the work of the General Assembly did, reducing the projected FY27 shortfall to $155 million and cutting in half the projected FY30 shortfall from $6 billion to $3 billion. I just added the language there just for your awareness that the federal revenue outlook was concerning. So the General Assembly added a provision for the budget in general. Should the revenue go below $1 billion below the budgeted amount for FY26, and specifically for education funding, it mandates 0% growth to per pupil funding allocations and other education aid if the annual budget estimate in December is more than 3.75% below the general fund estimate reported in March. So I think that is where I'm going to stop. I'm happy to take questions, or I'm going to stop sharing as well so I can see you.
Does the team have any questions for Joy before I ask a question? I'm going to give y'all some time if y'all had a question.
I had a quick question. And thank you, Joy, for coming online and to the committee and just presenting. It was very well presented, and I really do appreciate it. I have a question. Just think about the average person who may look at this later on and may have a little some questions. If when you said something, well, I'm sorry, when the budget says something along the lines of 0 per pupil for school year 27-28, how does that look for how does that look for the school system? So if somebody's just like, could you just like kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's 0% growth, which means, it won't be increased by the inflation factor. So it's basically freezing education funding levels at the level that they are currently.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question. So it freezes it, so that means you'll still continue to get what you've received in the past, but no more.
Correct. And really what it's talking about is when the governor presents his FY27 budget. So in December, they'll get revenue estimates. They'll match those to what did we estimate in March, and if they are below those levels that are called out in the legislation, then the governor is required to present an education budget with a 0 growth in terms of the level of funding.
Okay. And then I do have another question. Will community schools coordinators be impacted by this, or will they be able to remain in place?
Well, so community school funding, I would guess, because there is a mandated increase in FY27. That mandated increase of per pupil funding will remain at the FY26 level.
Okay.
So whether or not, so community
The
schools
positions are on a different grant. They're the personnel side of it, so they are not tied to the per pupil piece.
Right.
So
Very good, thank you. And then can I ask one last question around wraparound services? I guess I'm looking at what are the best ways to show the effectiveness of being a community school and having the additional funding. What are the best types of data to demonstrate that the funds have been utilized and that we see growth outside of just academic data?
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, I mean, I think the way that school systems are showing their funding and what they are putting their resources towards, and then this added provision in the bill, if school systems are spending money centrally, what are they spending that money on, and what are those resources providing students? I think that helps shore up the what is being done at schools and what the outcomes are beyond academics in the areas in which they're providing resources.
and then Dr. Grant, Mr. Anderson is on, Derek is on. He can go in a little bit further to your question. Because there's some stuff that we're getting ready to do as community schools that will help with that. My question is in the scheme of the nation, things constantly are changing around different funding sources being there, not being there. And I know we have ended this legislative session. Was there any discussion around emergency sessions that might need to happen if something else were to happen nationally that impacts us? So we are prepared for students in the fall. We know a lot of that decision making and things happens in the summer. So was anything brought up about that?
Yeah, I don't think any formal plans have been made for a special session. I know there was discussion about there might be a need for a special session, but I think that the provisions that they provided with regard to sort of the contingency of federal funding, I think that will serve to mitigate some of the need for that.
Yeah. Any other questions for Joy? Outside of, we would love that slide deck that you had, because I like how succinct and quick it was. And so we appreciate you coming for the updates. This is definitely what we needed coming off of many of us spring break.
Mm.
and getting back into the routine. And
Mhm.
so hopefully this will help those that are viewing and will watch this later understand pretty much how the legislative session supported us keeping our eye on the prize, which is the students and families, and making sure that we are sending students out prepared once they matriculate through K or pre-K through 12. We're
Well,
really
thank,
birth through 12, now that we think about it.
well, thank you
So
for
thank you
having
so
me.
much. We will then move on. Some of the other updates were not only from the legislator from the larger side, but I thought it would be great for us to come together and just get updates. Joy actually covered a great bit of it about the consortium on coordinated community supports when she talked about the extension of that funding. So we will go into our guests that we have with us today. And I will give Karen just a moment, and now I'll go to Derek since he was here to give us an update on the Concentration on Poverty Community School grant and that expansion for the 25-26 school year.
Yes, thank you, Hope. I'm going to drop a link in the chat box. Hopefully you all can access it. But Joy covered a lot of things, and essentially what this one pager does is summarize those changes and updates that are pertinent to or relevant to community schools specifically. And then I'll close with some plans we have in partnership with the Governor's Office of Children as we look ahead for for community school supports throughout the state.
It's
So,
saying I need access.
okay, so you don't have access.
No.
No one has access. Okay, not sure. Okay, copy that. I'm going to try one more time. Otherwise, I'll just jump in. With the link. Take two, see if we have any better luck.
Yes, got it.
Yes, perfect. All right. So as I mentioned before, Joy covered a lot of this, so I'll briefly go through this, and I welcome questions along the way. We don't have to necessarily wait until the end. As Joy mentioned, a big win is that flexibility for our smaller districts to utilize a portion of their funds for central office support. We've heard that particularly from those smaller districts for a while now, and looking forward to seeing how that develops with many of our districts adding new schools, but then having the opportunity to provide dedicated staff to community schools at the district level to provide that level of support. You can see what that administrative or central support could include. And then, of course, the last one says other administrative costs defined by the department, referring to MSDE. And that is where we would seek feedback and insight from some of the districts now about their plans moving forward with this particular provision. Another big important change is that of the countywide implementation plans for community schools. These plans are really meant to be inclusive of the school level implementation plans and informed by the findings from the various assets and needs assessments within a given district. While certainly every school is different and unique and has a variety of needs, in creating a countywide plan, the idea would be to look for particular themes or frequent occurrences across the district. And then again, centrally, that is something that can be addressed from a central level, be it through partnership, systems and structures set up at the district level to address that specific challenge identified through that analysis at the district level. As Joy mentioned, the plans are to include measurable goals to be revisited every 2 years to determine progress. Again, as we've done with a lot of the tools we've developed over the past year and a half, almost 2 years, our office will be consulting with district level leaders to talk about what these countywide implementation plans include, because there are a number of reports that we're asking for from LEAs, not just related to community schools, but a variety of other programs within our agency. So if there's an opportunity to condense some of those things, we want to try to be proactive in that way, given this new legislative requirement. Next is the in-school tutoring. So what this does is explicitly name that interventionists are an allowable expense during the school day for community schools. This was a question, somewhat gray area in previous versions of the legislation. So what this does is explicitly call out interventionists using evidence-based practices as an allowable expense, giving greater latitude for community schools who have identified the need to say, hey, we really want to dedicate some funding for these interventions, particularly during the school day. The annual reporting requirement goes into effect actually this summer. That came through with the 2024 legislation. However, there's a slight shift in the language. The language currently reads, community school coordinators will submit their annual reports on behalf of their school. The language added to the bill just notes that local school systems. So this is likely going to happen in some of our districts as it is, but really meant to spell out or highlight that that reporting is going to be a collaborative process with the central office as well as the school-based team to submit those reports annually. The statewide evaluation. So this is a question that came up a little bit earlier when we talk about assessing the impact. There is this timeline that on or before December the 1st of 2028, our agency will conduct a statewide evaluation. And really our approach would be to have a mixed method approach. So it looks at some of that quantitative data, such as what is being collected this summer, but also look at qualitative data so that we can determine what the impact is in a variety of ways. Just to give a little bit of details about those annual reports that start this summer, for those who may not be familiar, it does include a couple of measures, including how concentration poverty funds are allocated, how they were actually spent, the number of students identified as needing an intervention or wraparound service, the number of families and students who actually access one or more wraparound services, and then it also collects data on the number of volunteers supporting the school, and then strategies to reduce or address chronic absenteeism. So we're looking forward to more than 600 reports coming in that summarizes that data for our community schools. And that is really one of the first steps in addition to the data that we have as far as needs assessments and implementation plans. Now we'll start to get a sense of not only how the funds are being spent, but what are some things that are working specifically around chronic absenteeism. And as we move forward in statewide evaluation, as those plans come together, I'm sure other measures will be discussed and sort of put on the table when we think about what that statewide evaluation will look like. Just two more things, research and evaluation of community schools. So with that evaluation timeline or evaluation mandate, that will be in partnership with our institutes of higher education, more specifically Towson University and the Maryland Center for Community Schools. Right now, there is language that will collaborate in working with evaluating the concentration of poverty grant program. That's kind of broad, but we have plans to get together soon to kind of flesh this out and determine a plan moving forward. In addition to the grant program as a whole, just requirements for the implementation plans. So there's a meeting scheduled later this month, in fact, to again start to flesh that out, what that collaboration and partnership will look like for that. And then lastly, corrective spending by MSDE. Also, this was mentioned before, through the reporting that is going to begin this August. If there is something that is flagged or if there is something that is raising a concern, our agency would then communicate and work directly with that particular district regarding that school and address any questions there might be, but then also, instruct the county board to, like it says, make a reasonable portion of the school's funds on behalf of the school, just ensuring that that alignment is taking place. I'm going to pause there because those are a summary of the changes that we can expect for our community schools, both at the district level and at the school level. And I'll pause for any questions there before moving on to what to look forward to and expect from our office for community schools, also at the district and school level.
Are there any questions from the team? I won't show all my excitement because as a supervisor of community schools, this is stuff that I am very excited about right now. Because we have so many things that we're getting ready to do. And we already have a great working relationship across the state as those that support community schools, whether that be at the school-based level or the LEA level. So a lot of this is what we are excited to start working on or expanding even further during the summer. So any questions from anybody before he goes into the part?
I don't know, so it might be a question. But with the current state that we're in, there is a lot of turnover, very, very fast. And so I know that some programs and some research is going to be conducted this summer. Once you obtain the data, and you might talk about this later on, but I guess when is MSDE looking to implement the research that you come up with or the data that you obtain? When are you all looking to implement these new changes, or wherever the needs assessment and knowing where to allot the funds? And so it's like, I don't know, we're in this like heightened state in this climate. And so just looking for like, is there any concrete like deadlines that you all are like projecting moving forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would say that while there are no definitive deadlines within the next year, because we'll have the data presumably by August, and we'll have some other things going on, getting feedback from districts and schools that will inform not only best practices that we can share throughout, but the professional learning and technical assistance that we provide moving forward. So the first step is to collect that data. And part of what we like to do in collaboration with Towson University is one of the first things we'll talk about is how can we take the needs assessments that we have, identify trends there for needs, whether it be by district or within its particular region, and how can we, create a visual or something that can be a point of reference for, whether it be a state agency, a partner, what have you, to say, okay, this is a trend we've noticed in this part, and direct or, connect those resources in that way based on that data. Does that make sense?
I would just add, one thing I think is also going to stand out is the reporting of those that are completing their last year of implementation plans this year. And that will give you a combination of those that have gone through a cycle, along with the revision of the new needs assessment that our schools this year, who were identified for this 24-25 school year, are doing. I think that's going to show a grasp of data just off of what does it take for technical assistance? What does evidence-based tier 1, 2, or 3 supports look like? Do we have them in our state? Do we have them in a particular region? Does one region have more than another region? What are the areas to look at that could support our secondary schools with being college and career ready? But then also building the capacity of families. So that's why I said I won't get too excited because we'll get into this conversation afterwards. But one of the things for community schools that I have learned definitely this year is seeing the vastness of the growth, and that what community schools has seemed to continuously do, and I can only speak to that one part that I support right now, is pivot and adjust as the data has come up to show that we need to pivot and adjust. And so I think this fall will actually show that combination of those schools that started in the 2019 20 school year and have completed a cycle. And those that are in their first year needs assessment, just the vastness of what we actually dive into a little bit more, to ask more of the critical questions to know exactly how we need to support the students and families in each individual school. Because even within the LEA, you can have schools in the same cluster, same region of that district, and they still have vastly different needs. And that could be off of one apartment building, one subdivision, or that particular side of the street doesn't have a doctor's office, and you got to get to another side to get to it. Like, it's very detailed in some of the things that I think that will come out. Okay, Derek, you can go.
No worries. I was just going to piggyback Hope and say that that underscores the importance of the centralized support as well as the countywide implementation plan, because at the district level, you're far more equipped to identify where those gaps exist than we would be, as an agency looking at the state as more broadly.
Yeah.
So secondly, I also would like to share with the group that in partnership with the Governor's Office for Children, they have partnered with or have received grant funding from Blue Meridian Partners. And through that grant, there is a multi-year partnership with an organization called Communities in Schools. I want to be clear that in partnering with Communities in Schools, we are not shifting or pivoting. We still fully embrace the Community Schools Forward model that we've shared over the past 18 months or so. But specifically, Communities in Schools, their area of expertise is integrated systems of support. So this partnership is just starting. We had our first collaborative meeting just last Friday, but to give you kind of some big picture things, the objectives are kind of threefold. One is to launch the nearly 100 community schools that are coming online next year. So that would be inclusive of opportunities for district level staff, administration, and new community school coordinators. The second bucket or objective is accelerating current community schools. So this would be facilitating and holding communities of practice and opportunities where practitioners can come present and share their best practices for their district and or their school, because something we find quite often is that there is a lot of appreciation and a lot of value that comes when coordinators and those doing the work on the ground have the opportunity to network and exchange ideas and connect, even beyond something that we might facilitate. And then that last bucket is working a select or a handful, I'll say, of districts would partner with Communities in Schools and really look at intensive TA, I'll call it, and professional learning around strengthening their integrated systems of support through their community schools, but working in collaboration with the district as well. So those are the three things that we'll be looking at to start as early as next month. We're working on a virtual webinar for some of our district leaders now, and then these opportunities will be coming up early as this summer. Additional opportunities, both in person and virtual, will be coming up this summer and throughout the duration of the 25-26 school year and beyond. But as I mentioned, this is something that we just started to flesh out last week, and then we'll keep a regular cadence and develop these opportunities, share the opportunities more broadly, and looking forward to what's to come.
Thank you. Can you also just let everyone know how many community schools there will be in the state for next school year?
Yeah, so right now we're projecting 715 community schools across the state. Calvert County, to date, Calvert County was the only LEA that did not have at least one eligible school, but they will be on board next year with 2 schools, I believe, will become eligible, making every district across the state with at least one community school.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Derek? All right. So we'll keep going with some updates, and this is a different update. We had the special education work group come and speak to us before the end of 2024. We've had different ones come and speak to us, but we never really got into some of the related services. And so member Shalita Jones was able to secure these two ladies now who can speak to us about what does the blueprint look like for you all as it comes to related service. And so both are speech language pathologists, and it's their perspective around the blueprint and those related services that support students when you look at Pillar 4 and how we're talking about resources to for students to be successful. I will say I'm personally probably biased on this one a little bit as someone who is a mother of someone who was gifted with speaking a lot now as a 22-year-old, about to be 23-year-old. Started speech at 3 years old and then exited in second grade. So we had a very close relationship with our speech language pathologist that they had, my child had. And so I will say I'm a little biased because I know the great work of this related service and how that related service can actually take a child on a different trajectory, especially when it comes to literacy and being comfortable and having a sense of belonging and being able to participate in classrooms. So I'm glad to have you guys here. So I'll just give you guys some time to really just tell us about yourselves, and then you can give us your insight, and then the panel will ask questions after that. So I'll start with Karen, because I know you are actually the president of one of the organizations as well. So please go right ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Miranda, and I am currently the Maryland Speech and Hearing Association president. I'm also a Spanish bilingual speech and language pathologist in Prince George's County. I work on the bilingual assessment team. I've been on that team for actually 20 years now. So yeah, so what we're seeing right now, and I would like actually for Megan to introduce herself so that we can kind of talk at the same time and bounce off of each other, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Miskowski. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy for the Maryland Speech Language Hearing Association. I'm also a speech language pathologist and union leader for Baltimore City Public Schools.
And so what we would like to talk about, what we'd like to start with is just the shortages that we're facing. I know that the speech and language pathology shortages are across the nation, but definitely we're feeling it here in Maryland. And Megan, can you say a little bit more of that? And then I'll get into what we're doing at Prince George's County and the surrounding counties. Well,
it's all right.
okay.
You could have took the little guest with us as well.
Yeah. Do you want me to go ahead, Megan? All right. Well, we're really concerned, like I was saying, because of the shortages. And there is the blueprint bonuses that teachers receive for being nationally board certified. Well, as speech pathologists, we automatically have to have a national board certification, if you will. We belong to the American Speech and Hearing Association. Are you ready, Megan? Can you add more?
Sorry, guys, I'm by myself today. I've got a very young child screaming. No, so in the state of Maryland, speech pathologists are the third largest shortage in schools. The blueprint is fantastic, but SLPs are not addressed under some of the staff recruitment and retention planning. So we're not currently qualifying for blueprint style bonuses to show plan for how we're going to recruit and maintain more staffing. We're seeing significant increases in the number of state complaints because of lack of service providers. We have LEAs bringing in virtual contractors that are not providing good services to our kids. And we would like to see some movement from the state on how to address this issue.
I can take it from here, Megan. Thank you so much. She's our wonderful policy director of public policy, and she's been working very hard on passing bills and things like that. So I wanted her to say about that. One thing that we're doing in Prince George's County and surrounding counties like Montgomery County is we've started to our Grow Your Own program. Now that takes a very long time because we're starting at the middle school and high school level and maybe at the community college level where we are presenting to students our field of work. Just like Ms. McGuire just shared, she has had a relationship with a speech language pathologist because your child had speech services from an early age. But not very many people know about speech pathology unless you've come across them. And so, and especially our students, they don't know that that's a career path that they can choose unless we present it to them. A lot of us just stumble upon it. I know that I stumbled upon it by accident, and then that's how I chose to become a speech pathologist. Or some people know a family member that might be a speech pathologist, or unfortunately a family member that ended up in the hospital, and then they knew about speech pathology. So we want to change that, but that takes time. So as Dr. Miskowski just shared, we're really concerned about losing the speech pathologists that we do have or that are up and coming in our state, because a lot of the times they want to go to other places where they will be offered more money. And so we think that being part of that Blueprint bonus will really be an incentive for a lot of speech pathologists to stay in Maryland and attract more speech pathologists. Like I said, we go through the education already that is needed to become board certified, the hours that we have to put in of observation and of treatment and all those things in order to be nationally certified already before we even practice.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate what you guys sharing, because the first thing when you started talking, I wrote was shortages. Is it shortages? So I'm glad that you guys even brought that up, because I think that connects to the growing your own. And so I want to ask this question, because that's working with secondary, and you said that you work on a bilingual assessment team. I know at Montgomery County and a lot of our community schools, a lot of our families are from various cultures and countries who might be another sector who could fill in that gap. And so is there particular schools or programs within the state of Maryland that we should also be trying to maybe encourage parents to participate in and get the education to become a SLP as well?
You're saying to have parents become an SLP?
Yeah, we have some parents who have come here that have actual education in their former countries, but because we have different standards here, they might just need to know what are those schools, what is the pathway to getting that certification here in the state of Maryland. And so could you just really speak to what does it take to get that? What schools actually offer that in our university system? I know you talked about growing it from the perspective of secondary students, but we also have like this group of families where we have some parents who probably have degrees that could go in this pathway as well, but we just don't necessarily support them understanding here's an opportunity and a feel of giving back and supporting that you might actually be good in as well. And especially, I know for Montgomery County, when we think a lot of our documents and things that we have and services are in 7 official languages, that our bilingual assessment team could be massive with support, and especially from the speech side.
Well, I think that the first thing to do would be to see if any of those credits that are taken in another country are accepted. I don't know that they are. If they are, then they would have to attend a post-baccalaureate program, which would give them the foundation in the courses that they need, the prerequisite courses that they would need before applying to a master's program. And then they would need to apply to a master's program, and then they would need to complete which is that program, which is about 3 years, which is 2 years of schooling, and then 1 year of an externship or a semester or so, and then a year of what we call clinical fellowship year. I'm not sure, like I said, if there is reciprocity between what whatever college credits they have from another country and our department. Megan might know of something. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
No, I mean, Karen, what you said is correct. So if they already, there's no alternative program to become an SLP. So if they come in with a bachelor's degree, it would be exactly what Karen said, which is a minimum of a year of undergrad coursework followed by at least 2 years in master's degree program. I think that's a fabulous idea to try to bring some of our foreign educated parents into the field. The closest colleges to Montgomery County Public Schools are probably going to be the University of Maryland and Howard and UDC as well. And Gallaudet would be the closest ones from Montgomery County. Other programs in Maryland would include Towson, Women's Institute of Torres Seminary, and Loyola. And then I believe it's McDaniel will be our newest program here, starting a cohort in 2026.
Hello. Hi. So at the University of Maryland, we have what's called the HESP program, which is hearing and speech in the evening. I happen to be the coordinator of that program, and that's exactly what we do. We prepare. It's a post-baccalaureate program that prepares people from other career paths who want to make the switch over to speech pathology. But again, I'm not sure about that reciprocity between another country.
Well, I think just what you shared is just great information. I'm Montgomery County, but I know we represent everybody on this committee in the state. And one of the things that stands out to me for parents is also thinking of all of the federal employees right now that might not know where to land, just getting them to understand that their degrees and their background could actually shift them to growing in another field, and that their skills could be used in an area that they probably have never thought of. And that program, like you just said, being available and starting could actually maybe help us fill in some of that shortage, but then also bring a diverse background of other people to the field. Go ahead, Karen, sorry.
I've actually thought about that, and I've actually thought the other group that we're trying to target is community colleges, because a lot of people are undecided in community colleges, right? Not really knowing what they want to go into. And again, I am a product of community college, and I was there 2 years before I found out about speech pathology and wanted to make that turn. And I thought, wow, I could have really spent those 2 years focusing on getting ready for speech pathology. But that is something that I thought about, like maybe how can we, as the Maryland Speech and Hearing Association, reach out to those federal workers that unfortunately are facing uncertainty in their careers, and maybe try to reach out to them and see if they would be interested, or really just expose them to our field. Mr. Manko?
Yeah, Karen and Megan, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us on this important issue. And questions around, we've talked a lot about the recruitment of new SLPs, but wanted to see if you had any information around retention of SLPs, and if are we seeing retention as being as pronounced an issue as it is with just teachers in general, or is there a likelihood that SLPs are more of a likelihood that SLPs are staying in their positions or in the profession or in the schools or districts that they are working in? And if there are retention issues, what do you see as being primary causes of that and ways that we could mitigate some of the retention challenges?
I mean, I think one of the challenges right now is that we risk career shifting. So if I'm a speech language pathologist, I can become a special educator fairly easily. And if I do that, I start to qualify for things like National Board Teaching Certification, where I can work with a very similar population and get paid $17,000 more than a speech pathologist when we are, the third largest staffing shortage area in the state. And so I think that's a problem. And I've seen my colleagues shift out of current SLP roles into other positions within school systems where they're qualified for some of these retention tools that exist in LEAs. And they're right now for speech pathologist.
Understood. Thanks so much.
Are there any other questions? I would just say one of the things that I would maybe encourage the association reaching out is actually even to community schools. Derek is still on here. To get in front of all of the supervisors or directors that handle this work in our LEAs. One of the things I know, and I'm speaking from Montgomery County, I push is capacity building. And so listening to you all speak, I could definitely see how this could be a series that we do across the state, actually, of getting families that are in concentration of poverty areas and in these schools, understanding that your age and your circumstance does not dictate what could be a successful career for you and a different pathway. So yes, I might have said I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 10. That didn't happen, but it does not mean that the gifts that I have of speaking and speech cannot be transferred over to another area. And so that will be, something across the state for us to maybe be more in tune with. We spend time with the students and growing our own that way, but sometimes, especially when you think of the community school structure and it's supposed to be impacting students and families, is looking at what do those families need. And some of that is understanding, where do I start, or where do I begin again, or that my current circumstance doesn't mean that's my end, and how we can actually fill in some of these shortage areas. I'm sure there is multiple people who can go back and look at on their report card. It says, will not stop talking in class, always wants to explain to their classmate how they do something, great reader. And I just know many who probably don't know that they have maybe the gift to be a great speech pathologist, and understanding the science around what you guys do and its impact on literacy skills and just emotional well-being of people. When you can't communicate or don't know how to communicate, that brings on the frustration, can lead to behaviors that then lead to someone being maybe on an IEP for behavior, but that wasn't really what the issue was. They really just needed someone as strong as you all who are in this field with speech, to support them and just learning how to communicate what is happening. And I just say that also, and I preface this because I said I have a bias. It does make a difference when you can communicate truly everything out, where people understand what you're saying. You take the time to learn the strategies and skills, to the point that I still remember some of the exercises I had to do with that child, who is now about to be 23 years old in June. And it does make a difference for the parent as well to understand this is what is needed for your child to communicate. Shalita?
Thank you all for coming. I just wanted to give you space to, when you're looking at the blueprint, are there things that are working? Are there things that are not working? So we can kind of understand or get a better understanding of where maybe resources need to be allotted, because you are treating and you are working with the students and you are in the midst of being in meetings and talking with other educational stakeholders, especially when it comes to the blueprint. So just want to just provide a little bit of space of like what is working and how this potentially, not potentially, like how can this blueprint be improved? But yeah, just want to give you that space.
I think it's what Dr. Miskowski just mentioned, being part of the National Board Certification bonuses would be a huge retention opportunity for the speech pathologists who we already have. and to call in those speech pathologists that are already on the verge of graduating. Like I said, what we're doing with the Grow Your Own program, it will take time. And even if we go to government workers or to parents, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. Like we were saying, it takes at least 2 years of or at least at minimum 1 year of prerequisites, 2 years of graduate school, and then we have some field work year that has to be completed. And that doesn't account for retention. That accounts for, growing our own speech pathologists. But as far as retention, it's really about supporting the speech pathologists that we have now. Like you said, we work with a lot of students. We attend a lot of meetings. We have a lot of preparation for us to become speech pathologists. And so just really making them a part of the benefits that the educators also receive. A lot of us in the different counties are part of our salaries. We're on the same salary scale as teachers. So again, so we're kind of hand in hand, but not treated the same. Megan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some really wonderful things in the blueprint around mental health providers, social workers, and psychologists, but that there are not blueprint pieces that address speech pathologists. The shortage of speech therapy, which again is the third largest staff shortage area in Maryland schools.
How many are we short? You said the third largest, so
Hundreds. We could hire every single person coming out of a graduate program and it would not meet enough. We are using contractors to cover positions, and then we still have open positions. Districts are bringing in virtual contractors from across the US. SLPs are a potential solution, but we don't have any speech pathology assistant programs in the state of Maryland, which is something that MASH has been advocating for as well. And so we've seen an increase in licensing around SLPAs because we've been trying to create more job pathways to help at least get in-person providers for our students.
thank you. And don't worry about the kids. It's fine. We still can hear you. Even though you're having to walk a mile away. And so first I just want to say thank you guys tremendously for sharing. Oh no, well, I want them to be sad. Because this is great information to share and to put out there for those that watch our live and then actually go back and watch this recording, because to know that this is the third largest area and it's an area that could actually be supporting us in addressing something that has come up now as a state, which is that focus on literacy and what are some of the indirect and direct things that impact literacy. Knowing that we would need to address this shortage and needing more people to grow our own in the system in the state when it comes to language pathologists is definitely some information that we needed for today. So I want to say thank you for coming, and we'll definitely be in touch to try to connect you to other places and people who can help across the state when it comes to this need.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. We're so happy to be here. Shalita, thank you for reaching out and for meeting with us, all of you for listening to us. And yes, hopefully we can make some other type of connections. I think as my tenure here as president, I would really like to get something started before I end. Of course, whoever comes in after me will take over, but really this is something that we would really like to get started on. So yes, any connections that you can do, you can provide us with would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having us.
No, we thank you for your time, especially after spring break, being able to jump on with us today. And so in the last few minutes that we have in the meeting, it's just to remind everybody, our next meeting is May 27th at 4 o'clock. Our focus is on the Pillar 4 timeline and kind of like the measures of impact and success. We will also at that meeting be discussing what does our 25-26 grouping of meetings and topics look like, so we can kind of have a running ahead of meeting topics or organized for those that are interested in Pillar 4, so that we also can get in more speakers, more thoughts and trainings around what is needed to implement the blueprint Pillar 4 across the state for everyone. So that's one thing that's coming up. The other thing is, if anybody has an area that is aligned to Pillar 4, please reach out to us to get on one of our agendas. This is not for any sales pitches, though, just to put that out there. This is about if you currently do some of the work within the state that can actually benefit the blueprint implementation, and you are watching and you know that you would like to represent from your LEA or from an organization within the state that could help Pillar 4 get this information out to more people through our lives, we would greatly appreciate you guys reaching out to us about that. At this time, are there any other questions, comments, concerns that we might, or areas that we want to definitely bring up at the 27th? We will also go back and try to see if we can get more updates about the neighborhood poverty indicators at the meeting on May 27th as well. If there are no other comments, we thank you for participating today. To all of our distinguished guests that joined us, Derek, Joy, Megan, Karen, and to the board, we appreciate you guys and all of your feedback and information shared today for Pillar 4. And we will see you guys back on May 27th.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
All right.